Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Disruptive Technologies Cluster at the University of Salford. My name is Andy Meir, and I'm delighted to have another session for you in our series of events that are trying to interrogate what disruptive technologies are and discover, hopefully, some of the innovative things that are happening around our digital platforms. It's a wonderful afternoon here in the UK, and we're really excited to have fantastic guests joining us today. We're going to have a nice conversation about a wonderful concept, and I would say social movement called thought economics. But to kick things off, I first want to welcome Naomi into the stream. Naomi Timperley, how are you?
I'm great, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It feels like a long time since we've seen each other face to face. How has everything been for you?
Everything's been really good. Last year was a bit weird, obviously. I did actually have a job last year for a very small amount of time. The first job that I'd had for about 18 years, and pandemic hit and that went. So yeah, I've been freelancing, working on some really incredible projects. So yeah, all's good.
And I'm always seeing stuff about you on LinkedIn and social platforms. You've been working with or developed a really fantastic accelerator program called Freelancer. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so it's a project I was commissioned by Infor Group and the host, which is Home of Skills and Technology, to develop a program specifically for female founders and freelancers in the creative tech and digital space. We launched it at the end of November for applications, and we had 114 women start on the program, and we'll be finishing with 104. So the program actually started at the beginning of February. It's a mix of workshops, community, which is really at the heart of it, peer-to-peer mentoring, and then we have things like brunch and learns. And it finishes, it's the 12th week next week. So I'll be very sad next week when it all finishes.
I bet it sounds like you've done a great deal in that program over what's been a really over a difficult time, especially. That's incredible.
Yeah, and I think also it was in response to women really being affected by the pandemic. A lot of women work in hospitality and retail. A lot of women that have lost their jobs because they've had caring responsibilities. So it was also one of the reasons why Infor Group wanted to do a program like this is to respond to that.
I mean, I think certainly over this period, as you will know, it's the Digital City Festival happening over the next couple of weeks. And my Vice Chancellor was on a session yesterday talking about the inclusive economy and the Salford Innovation Triangle, where we're just trying to really think about how we build a community that is inclusive and recognizes just how different people's lives are. I mean, there's so much inequality around, isn't it? It feels like such a big priority right now.
Yeah, definitely. And also the program, obviously it's for women, but it's very inclusive. We've got women from all over Greater Manchester. We have a few women from Cheshire, Lancashire and Merseyside. And we're still getting applications in, and it's just so hopefully we'll be able to do another. I was
going to say, is there going to be another iteration? Do you think? It sounds like there will be.
The plans, we want to work with another 900 women. We just need to get the funding to do it, but it will happen. And it's been an absolute pleasure to work with the team at Infor Group and host on it, and also all the amazing facilitators and mentors that we've had on the program as well.
I mean, it's great to have you here, not least because it just always reminds me of how fantastic it is in the Northwest and how many remarkable, creative and innovative people are around us. And it's all what I love about Greater Manchester is we just bump into each other. And just the other day, when I went back to Media City for the first time in over a year now, I just happened to bump into our guest for today, Vikas Shah, who I'm going to bump into the chat right now. So Vikas, hello.
Hi, good to see you.
I mean, it just feels like every corner you turn in Manchester, you bump into someone you know, and it was lovely to see you on Monday.
It is one of the really lovely things about the city, isn't it? Where it's small enough to have a community, but big enough where you can still kind of be ambitious and do amazing things.
Yeah, and how's your year been? What's it been like for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's had this weird mixture of challenges, but also just really good things. One of our main businesses is in hospitality market, so that's obviously been facing a lot of challenges, but we've also been looking at new investments, new markets, which has been positive. And of course, the lockdown actually gave me enough time to finally write the book. So there's been some, it's not been all bad. There's been some really good things happening as well, but it's been a mix of one and the other.
Yeah, definitely. And Naomi, I think that the last time we saw each other was actually about a year ago at the Digital City Festival. So it feels like,
Oh,
gosh,
wow.
so much has
Yeah, I
happened in
think
that.
I remember you interviewed me because you had
That's
this
right.
amazing little studio, and I think I ended up interviewing you as
I
well
was
at
going
the
to
end
say
of
that's
it.
how it worked out in the end.
Yeah. No, it was good. It was good. It was good. It was good.
Yeah, and it's fantastic to have this topic for today, because I think that this has been such an important period of reflection. I see so many people now starting to think about, well, what is the new normal that we're going to move into? And I think, Vikas, looking at the Thought Economics website, it's really interesting to get across the concept, because I think it's so much more than the book, although the book is now out there, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, the resources that you have around it, the interviews with all the people, it's just incredible. When did it start for you?
So Thought Economics started back in
Yeah.
2007, literally as a side hustle. Like the whole principle was, so that was the sort of time where media was changing quite dramatically. So, all these wonderful long form publications that I used to enjoy, everything was going digital. The business model changed. Everything was going short form. It was a change that I didn't enjoy as a kind of consumer. So I literally went on to blogger.com, set up an app,
I remember blogger.com.
I set up an off-the-shelf
Old school.
Old
thoughteconomics.blogspot.com.
school,
Yeah.
exactly.
And I initially just started interviewing people that I'd met at conferences and things over the years. And it just took its own life from there. It was never a plan. There was never a plan with it.
Wow. Well, I look forward to hearing more about it. I'm going to jump out of the call for a moment and let you guys have your fireside chat about Thought Economics. And for those of you who are watching, just Google Thought Economics after this, and you'll see so many things that you can follow up on, conversations with remarkable people from all sectors. So I'll hand over to you, Naomi, to lead the conversation. I'll see you at the end.
Thank you, Andy.
Thanks,
okay,
Andy.
thank you. So this is the book. And do you know what? It's an incredible book. I've read most of the things actually when you tweeted them out in the first place. But just a couple of questions, really, about just following on from what Andy had just said. Is, you started this how many years ago?
2007, so a good 14 years now.
Yeah. So you've been
Long time.
interviewed. Who was the very first person that you interviewed?
So
do you remember?
There was a couple. I don't remember the exact name, but there was a couple of people who were like economists and people like that I'd met at conferences. And I think it might have been somebody from UBS or Credit Suisse, something like that. Yeah. So there was a whole period of time where it was literally just people like that before I'd kind of got my first big name person.
So the big name people, and I know that you've been asked this question a lot, and I know I've 100% asked this of you. How do you get these incredible people to say yes to an interview?
It's really hard. I mean, for every person that says yes, there's probably at least 20 people that I've reached out to, 10 of whom just didn't respond, and then of the remainder, it's trying to negotiate, right? It's like anything. It sounds silly, but it's like sales. It's trying to figure out, okay, these are the clients that I want to get into. What's the route? Do they have a publicist? Have they got a business investment? Is there someone that I can find on LinkedIn who has just some remote connection to them?
Yeah.
So it's just trying to find a way. I mean, if all else fails, I'll go through the publicist. Yeah. Because that's always the toughest route. But if I can find a way that doesn't involve that, I'll always go with that first. But it's really hard. And obviously, in the early days, it was even harder because there wasn't that much on the site. There wasn't that many household names on there. There wasn't that many people that people would recognize. Whereas obviously, as the site builds and you get more content, it does become a bit easier.
And how many people have you interviewed in total for Thought Economics? Must be hundreds.
Yeah, I think it's about 400 and something in total.
Right, okay. And how do you obviously, just for those of our audience who don't know you do a lot of other things as well. So can you just sort of just talk to us about that really quickly before we go back onto the book?
Yeah, so I own a group of companies based up here in Manchester. So the largest of which is Swisscott Group, which is a global commodities trading business. We've also invested in a few technology startups over the years, and we support a whole bunch of charities here and internationally. And I teach at a couple of universities. So that's kind of a day job bucket.
Yeah. So how have you fit? Because obviously, yes, it's been like 14 years in the making, but how have you managed to do these interviews whilst doing all the other things that you already do?
So one of the most important things that I've always thought with thought economics is, in my mind, I've got to try and always make it feel like a hobby. And what that means is you do it when you have time, right?
Okay.
It would be so easy to launch something like this and go, right, I have to do one a week, I have to do this, I have to do this. But who's pressuring me? Nobody. There's no one else involved. It's just me. So by making sure that it's something which I always think, okay, as and when I've got time, I'll do it. And that means that I might go through, weeks and weeks with nothing and then a whole bunch of interviews at once. But weirdly, that's also meant that I've kept my enthusiasm for it as well. It's never felt like a job, so I can always keep going.
Who's been the most interesting person that you've interviewed? And I know that you've interviewed lots of amazing people, but who was that standout person?
Do you know, there's been a few. I did a whole series of interviews with Holocaust survivors not long ago, and that was unreal, because you're talking about people that have been through, what can only be described as the most awful thing any human could go through, and just their strength and their forgiveness, and it was unreal. And so they were fascinating. And then also, I think, just with so many of the interviewees, when you have an hour on the phone or an hour on Zoom with someone, you just get to dig into their humanity a bit more. And, once they've got over the fact that their publicist has told them to say a few things, you actually start to get to know them and get to know who they are as people, and that's also really fascinating.
So you've interviewed people like Maya Angelou. What was it like interviewing her? She's somebody that's quoted
everywhere.
A lot, everywhere. What was it like? What was it like interviewing her? So
there's a few times in this journey where you genuinely get anxious and sweaty palm before a call, because you're like, this isn't real. And with Maya Angelou, it was interesting because I'd managed to figure out a contact at their office, and they never outright said no. They just kept saying, try back later, she's busy, try back later, she's busy. And then eventually her office literally said, look, we'll give you 10 minutes because we know you're persistent, which basically means we'll give you 10 minutes if you stop emailing us.
Okay.
And then 10 minutes into the call, we had this amazing chat, and then 10 minutes in, the office chime in and say, that's your 10 minutes. And Maya Angelou said, oh, we're just having fun, let's just keep going. And in the end, I was on the phone with her for an hour. It's unreal, because people like that are geniuses. There's something different about them.
Yeah, the quote that you put in the book. So this is one in specifically on culture, the context of humanity. So there's something which impels us to show our inner souls. The more courageous we are, the more we succeed in explaining what we know. She is an icon to so many people. What was the thing, and just with her specifically, what did you learn from the end of that conversation?
This is going to sound really weird, but I learned to read past the quotes into the depth of the story.
Yeah.
Because everything she says is poetic. She could tell you the time and it'll make a beautiful quote for Instagram or something. But the point is, you speak to her and you realize that when she says something like that, that comes from the fact that she was a civil rights campaigner. She was born at a time where your skin color defined who you were. She was on the steps with Martin Luther King when he made that incredible speech. So there's the depth of experience behind the quote that we all know.
Yeah.
And weirdly, I didn't internalize that until I spoke to her.
Yeah.
But this is the thing, every conversation that you have changes you.
Yeah.
And that's been one of the most fun parts of this as well. But no, she was unreal, and I'm forever grateful that they said yes.
There's another, you've got another section in the book on entrepreneurship, the creators.
Your favorite topic?
Yes, it is actually.
Yes.
And this particular bit I really like. So this is a quote from Muhammad Yunus, who's one of the other people that you interviewed. I believe all human beings are entrepreneurs at their core. It is in our DNA. So can you tell me a little bit more about the conversation that you had with, say, Muhammad and some of the other entrepreneurs? Because obviously you've interviewed people like Mark Cuban, lots of other really big entrepreneurs. What would you say that you learned from them?
So I guess it was sort of inevitable, much like yourself, you're very much immersed in business world, as am I. And I think to that extent, it was going to be inevitable that I've interviewed, that I do interview a lot of entrepreneurs. And it's really interesting seeing the reality of these individuals versus what we think, right? Because it's so easy to get caught up in the hype bubble of startups where everyone's always hustling and doing all this, and then you realize it's not real. Like, that's not real. Like, the most successful entrepreneurs that I've met, and these are all most of the people in the book are, in that section are all multi-billionaires. They're very values based.
Yes.
They do look after themselves. They don't believe in that 24/7 always hustle thing. They get their heads down and get on with the work. They're generous. They're kind. They've got huge emotional intelligence, right? It's practically the opposite of what we're told entrepreneurs should be.
Because
I always find that remarkable.
I think, there's obviously, some of the people that you've interviewed are incredible role models. I think that a lot of the role models that, entrepreneurs on their very beginning of their journey are people like Alan Sugar, Karen Bray, all these TV show type people, the Dragon's Den type thing. But also, I think there's a lot of smoke and mirrors when it comes to entrepreneurs. And I know this is something that we've spoken about before. And I think what's really interesting, and I loved that you just said that the ones that you've spoken to, the values shine through, they're hardworking, they give back. I think there is definitely a misconception of what an entrepreneur is as well. And
there's also a misconception about the entrepreneurship community, right? Because there are genuine communities of entrepreneurs that help each other. They're like peer mentors and they're getting on with it. But there's also a cult of entrepreneurs alongside club of entrepreneurs. And the cult aspect is the one which is growing and toxic, which is where, and you can spot them because the cult of entrepreneurs just post motivational quotes to Instagram. They won't dig into a story. They won't try and figure out what's real and what isn't. It's, it's really toxic because no one succeeds that way. And there's a lot of personalities in this space. There's people like Gary Vaynerchuk and people like that. And when you dig in, the reality is they've made their money by being, personal brands, not as being entrepreneurs.
Exactly. I think you've hit the nail on the head. I think there's a really big focus, way too much, on the personal brand of an entrepreneur rather than actually what the substance is, what the values are, and actually what they do, what they sell.
And what's really interesting is personal brand. If you keep doing a good job, it just it comes. So in my own journey, right? I'd never actively sought profile when I had a business because I was like, it's just running a business, right? But then as your business grows and you start doing other things and you start getting asked to do things, and every now and again you say yes, and eventually a profile builds. But by doing it naturally and organically and letting it happen, you end up with a much more robust sense of self because what you're not doing, and it really pains me when I see a lot of startups doing this, is you'll end up with a startup CEO who's often just themselves or a couple of other people, and they start holding out like they're some big deal and they're doing all this, and they spend so much time speaking at events that they never actually do any work on their business, and it burns out. And the thing is, it is quite seductive, right? It's nice having press coverage. It's nice being invited to do things like this.
It's not a legacy, though.
Exactly. And it's not real either. It's an instantaneous dopamine hit which fades.
So obviously this group that we're speaking on, so this is Disruptive Technologies Digital Cluster. Would you say, out of all the people that you have interviewed, that there were any disruptors within them?
Oh, totally. And disruption's odd, isn't it? Because we think about disruption as being, Uber. So people always go, well, Uber disrupted taxis. And they were probably like the 100th taxi app. It's just that when they came out, technology had converged at the right point. But in every category, so in the book, there's categories on leadership, art, identity, every segment of culture has had people that have disrupted things and they've moved things forward. So we spoke about Maya Angelou. Maya Angelou was a disruptor in civil rights, right? like Hans Zimmer was a disruptor in music because he actually made classical music somewhat more mainstream again. There's loads of entrepreneurs who've built great things, artists, innovators. But disruption in society only happens when a few of those people come together, because it doesn't happen in isolation.
No.
Because for something like Facebook to happen, for example, you
Yeah.
need technology, you need culture, you need people who enjoy taking pictures. There's so many things that have to happen simultaneously. So if you want to understand disruption, you've got to see it across society as a whole to really understand it.
So you used to be a professor, well, you just sort of done professor teaching entrepreneurship at MIT Sloan in Lisbon. What would you say is the key element? So this is a combination of, obviously the students that you've worked with, but also from the book. What's the key element to making somebody successful in business?
So, I mean, there's a few, but I'll give you a couple. So one of the first things is intellectual breadth, right? So to give you a classic example, the most successful entrepreneurs I've met very rarely read too many business books. Their bookshelves are full of arts and science and history and all sorts of things. And it might sound odd, but it makes sense. You can only join the dots that you can see. And the wider your intellectual breadth is, the more patterns you'll see, the more you can see things that are happening before everyone else. So feed your mind with as much as you can from as many sources as you can, because that will really get you ahead. The second thing, which I think is really critical, which is not taught enough in business degrees, and when I teach at MIT and at Manchester and other places, I always try and put this into the program, which is psychology. You've got to understand yourself, and you've got to understand other people. You've got to train yourself to have emotional intelligence, to understand how to manage you, and also how to really understand other people and get the best out of them. And those two things, I think, are really intrinsic in people being successful.
I think just to sort of add on to that, I think having tenacity and resilience is a really big thing as well, because it's not easy.
It's not.
I think what a lot of people think, make assumptions of, is, Airbnb was just successful overnight. Uber was just successful overnight.
But also, don't forget that's a different universe, right?
Yeah.
Like, if you were in Silicon Valley today, it would not be that hard for a very average idea to raise tens of millions in venture funding, right? So that's not that hard in Silicon Valley, because there's $800 billion of venture capital waiting to be invested. Doesn't happen like that in the rest of the world.
No.
So in the UK or in Europe, you are scrapping to raise $500,000.
But even in the UK, it's certainly in the Northwest. I think a lot of Northwest entrepreneurs that are looking for investment have to go to London.
Yeah, and that's fine. That's where the money is. Like, I do get worried sometimes when there's this kind of sense of North versus South, or I will only work with the Manchester investor or whatever. Silicon Valley isn't a real place. You've got San Francisco at the top, and then you've got Palo Alto and all the other cities at the bottom where the companies are. So think of the UK like that. You've got our London, our San Francisco, where the money is, and then Manchester, Birmingham, Leeds, where the companies and innovation are, right? There's nothing wrong with having to travel to get the money. But at the same time, we've got to be ambitious. You can make front page news in Manchester for raising 50 grand in investment, but you've got to scale your business. You've got to raise enough money where you can actually reach your objectives and get to the next stage.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's go back 14 years ago. So you've started the Thought Economics blog, and what did you ever envisage at that early stage that you would ever make it into a book?
No, there was no. This is the weird thing. There's never been a plan with Thought Economics, right? Thought Economics is something I enjoy doing. I enjoy getting to speak to amazing people. It's it's a real buzz. But there was never a plan. There was never a plan of doing a book. That just sort of happened. There was never a plan for what next. There's no categories on the website. You just go and dig around and see what takes your fancy. So I kind of like that. I kind of like the fact that it is so unstructured, that opportunities just happen with it. But no, there was never a plan with it.
So how did you decide? You've interviewed 400 people. How did you decide which interviews to put in the book?
So to give you an idea, that book is about 90,000-ish words.
Mm-hmm.
All of the stuff in the book is obviously no longer on the website, but on the website there's still about 1.3 million words left to go at.
Right.
So,
okay. Wow.
So in terms of writing the book, the single longest task was going back through all of these interviews and trying to find the key learnings, because and it was simultaneously soul affirming and soul destroying, because
because the way the book's structured is, you've got obviously the subjects, you've got different subjects, but then you've got.
So the publisher had 2 editors working on the book, and I remember having a conversation with them saying, look, there's no point in me trying to pick out who I think is the best one, because that's going to be very, very subjective, right? It's going to be very much who I think is interesting. And I said to them, you go away, let's all do this exercise and compare notes. And the ones that we all basically had picked out, the quotes, the messages, the names, that's what made it into the book. But it was a very difficult task, because there's so much you want to share and so many things you want to say. But that was really hard.
Okay, I'm going to go off on a tangent again. So Wasim's just put in a question. Going back to the discussion earlier, do you think emotional intelligence is given enough importance in current higher education curriculum? Is it something that can be taught easily?
I really genuinely don't think it's given enough, if any, importance. It's really hard, because it's covered in a very superficial way. So you get a lot more schools now teaching kids how to be mindful and things like that, but it doesn't give you even the basics that you would get from going to counseling a couple of times. I spent years in therapy, but those early few sessions in therapy are brilliant, because they just teach you how your brain works. All of a sudden you're like, oh, that's why I feel anxious, that's why they're doing that. Oh, okay, I get it. That's the key. You need those keys to unlock all the different humans around you, and to unlock yourself and why you respond to things a certain way. And it gives you so much strength to be successful.
But I think that also comes down to sort of the way that you communicate as well. So I did some work with an amazing company on a project called Go Digital. And we worked with 50 schools around Greater Manchester, and I was part of the delivery team. So I did all the assemblies, and I did it with a guy called Ashley Barrado, who does a number of different things, but one of them is around communication styles. And he uses this thing called IMA, which it stands for identify, modify, and adapt. It's one of those sort of test things you do, and it tells you what color, whether you're a red, which means you've got really good leadership qualities, and your style of communication would be very matter of fact, for example. You've got green, which is very detail focused, and actually the way that they would communicate with somebody, say like me, who is a high yellow, would be, I'd have to tone it down a bit. And I think going back to emotional intelligence, there's so many different aspects of it. It comes down to how you communicate, but also as well, if you are a young person with neurodiversity, that's another completely different ballgame, because your emotional intelligence is almost hampered, isn't it?
Yeah, and it also, I think it comes down to the fundamental understanding that strength and power are different, right?
Yeah.
Like, power is quite an oppressive thing. Like, power is, I'm going to shout at people and swear at them and get my own way and, smash my fist around till things get done. Strength comes from respect and leading people.
Yeah.
And that means yourself, and you know what you're good at, what you're bad at, you know how to lead, how to motivate people. And that's the bit that we're not taught, because every role model that seems to be out there in entrepreneurship is about power.
Yeah, and that's not. No, I completely
and
agree
that's so unhealthy. And this is where the emotional intelligence bit comes in, because power doesn't require emotional intelligence; it requires a big stick. Strength does.
And one of the questions, so Maxwell Kamano's just put a question in, and I'm going to read the question out, but I'm just also going to touch on something else as well with regards to what he's saying. So where he's from, Kenya, there is a huge industry of informal labour we call jukale. I hope I've pronounced that right. The biggest gap is soft skills. Do you think this is a key area to teach in business? I would say absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And what I would also say, just from reading your book, and also just based on some of the things that you talked about, qualities of the entrepreneurs, is that all of those entrepreneurs that you interviewed have got those soft skills. So how do you teach that? And actually, I think it should be taught from a very, very young age, personally.
I agree. It's about a move from STEM to STEAM, because the A in STEAM, arts, the liberal arts, which encompasses everything from history to culture to religion to psychology, that's the bit where you develop soft skills. I think the other thing is looking at what the cultural norms are. So, I also helped to found a global charity called In Place of War, and we actually operate in Kenya and 31 countries now. And there's a lot of places in the world that have this massive pool of informal labor and also informal entrepreneurship. So you go to Kenya or Uganda or Sudan or places, more people are entrepreneurs than are not entrepreneurs, because everyone's doing something to make money. So it's demystified in that sense. And so the informal economy has to just hustle to get the job done. But that's real hustle. That's actually doing things, right? And that's based on the fact that you have to develop soft skills to get ahead.
But actually, that goes back to Mohammed's quote in the book, which is,
Correct.
I believe all human beings are entrepreneurs at their core. It's in our DNA. And actually, I think it probably is, because it's a survival, isn't it? We've had to survive, and it's a survival. So, in some countries, if you don't work for yourself or you're not entrepreneurial, you cease to have money coming into your bank account.
I think more people have been entrepreneurs than haven't, if you know what I mean. And to the extent that for most of humanity, we didn't have these, big corporate structures where you could go and have some fancy, impossible job title and hide behind the desk all day. It was we had to just do things, right? And
make things.
And that attitude is really what I think constitutes what entrepreneurship should be. Whereas what we've developed now is a whole industry that makes money off the back of making it sound hard. It doesn't take much Googling to find your nearest entrepreneurship consultant. So it should be something that we just teach as a natural skill set, because it's not hard. It really isn't.
Yeah, I think so. And then going back to the soft skills, actually, I think that the soft skills is something that should be taught, whether you're doing business or not. I think it's something that actually it's almost takes second place to exams and results. I'm going to just touch on the question that Alex has put in. So what advice would you give to the next generation of aspiring tech entrepreneurs?
So this might sound counterintuitive, but my advice would be don't get too seduced by tech, because tech is not an island in its own way. If you have come up with some remarkable innovation, which is a very IP rich technology, then fine. But otherwise, what you're doing is you're impacting something. You're developing something that makes a supply chain better, makes healthcare
which is tech enabled.
Yeah. So really, it's trying to understand enough about the world around you where your knowledge and passion for technology can make a difference somewhere else. It's very rare, if ever, that I've seen an entrepreneur who's made a success of just knowing tech.
Yeah, and I think it's also being really clear, and Alex will absolutely love that I have this book just to hand. Sorry that we're going on to another book, but this is being really clear what your value proposition is and what problems you're solving. Because you know what, you can have a great tech idea, but actually if you can't articulate what the damn thing is, you can't create it and you can't sell it.
Okay, I'll give you one example. A few years ago, we almost invested in a business that did they produce nanoparticles that get sprayed on metal underwater, and it increases the life of oil rigs. And they were making the point that by spraying this onto the arms and legs of oil rigs, it would save a typical rig operator over $100 million over the lifetime of a rig. Sounds great. Oil company doesn't care because it's not enough money saved for them to warrant doing it.
Yeah.
Right. So just because you've got an innovative technology doesn't mean anyone cares enough to actually buy it from you. It has to have a real commercial application, solve a real pain point, or improve people's lives in a way that makes them want to use it.
Yeah, absolutely. So is there going to be a thought in economics too? Because you've got all these like a couple of million words left on the blog. Is there going to be another version? And actually, if there was another version, you know, there's obviously subjects that you talked about in this book. What's next?
So there was loads of sections that we'd come up with. So when I say we, I mean me and the editors, and they got binned because it just wasn't enough space. So maybe, I mean, you know, I'd love to do a book just on legacy.
Yeah.
Because I think one of the really interesting things has been asking people what do they hope their legacy will be. What do they think is the most important change they've made in the world? So maybe I actually don't know, and I like not knowing. I like the fact that I thought economics still remains a project without a plan.
So I'm going to throw that question back to you. What's your legacy? If you got run over by a bus tomorrow, what's your legacy? And hopefully you won't get run over by a bus tomorrow. I just wanted to say that. What do you want to leave?
Looking at my diary, there's nowhere that I'm going tomorrow which involves me crossing a road, so I should be okay.
That's good. That's good.
And this is going to sound really basic, but as long as it mattered to a few people, that I was as long as I'd left a few people's lives a little bit better from having been here, that to me that's enough, right? It's like leaving the room a little bit tidier than when you went in. That's enough for me. You know, anything else, you know, every now and again you get the chance to do something big, and every now and again, you know, like in Place of War or the Manchester Cancer Centre, so every now and again you get to do big stuff, but those are little blobs along the way. I think in the grander scheme of life, however long that is, I think as long as it mattered to a few people that was here, then that's enough.
Okay,
Genuinely.
I've got another question about one of the other organisations that you work with. So you've been involved with Future Everything for a long time, and you know, you obviously only just recently come off the board. What do you think? You know, could you just explain to the audience what Future Everything is?
So Future Everything started in Manchester about 24, 25 years ago. And the whole aim originally was to create a conference which brought together science, arts, entrepreneurship, and academia, basically around the same table to tinker and experiment to figure out what the future was going to be. Over the years, that morphed and grew. And so Future Everything became effectively a design lab for governments and corporations to envisage what will the future be. So we work with the Singapore government to help them understand what does democracy mean. First time any international organization's done that. Cisco, IBM, all these amazing businesses. And, you know, Future Everything is one of Manchester's most profoundly successful secrets. 25 years of working with the biggest organizations in the world around innovation and futurology, as we now call it. But the secret sauce there isn't radical. The secret sauce of Future Everything is very simply that it brings together arts, philosophy, entrepreneurship, technology, all the disciplines around the same table. That's the whole point of it, really.
And just with that as well, because you know, how important do you think creativity is to people coming up with ideas?
If
organizations as well.
I think as individuals, if you don't give yourself the space to have something creative in your life, it makes it very, very hard for you to experiment, because creativity is basically play. And if you want to innovate, you have to play. It might be with technology, it might be with a new business model, or an idea or a conversation or whatever. And so if you don't hone those skills down, it makes it really hard for you to think in unusual ways. You know, like when we're kids, like if we'd have grown up together, we would have like pretended to have a war or something, and your imagination can make that happen, and your war has rules and rules of engagement, and things happen and you figure it out. That's basically what creativity and innovation are for humans, is giving yourself a space to be able to think in a way where you're playing, to see what happens, to see what comes out of it. And that's where genuinely some of the best stuff comes from.
And you know, we're really lucky at the University of Salford because we have a makerspace We've got the Mawson Makerspace, which is an incredible space where you can just go and make stuff and ideate. We've also got, the university, the engine house, where we've actually got, I think we've got 2 now. So we've got houses in there, you can test things. So yeah, I think creativity and just being able to be innovative is something that I think that certainly any student thinking about coming to the University of Salford has the opportunity. So just going back to thought economics, hopefully you're going to be releasing another book at some point, which I think would be incredible. I love the legacy idea. Who is the person that said no that you still want to speak to?
Do you know what? There's been a few, and there's been a few people who said no, and then I'm like, I'm just gonna keep going. But I once not that long ago, I'd emailed Elon Musk with my standard email about, I want to interview you, and I thought I was being clever and said, well, here's a few people I've interviewed, and just by way of reference. And he went, and the email back was very short, which was, no, I don't care who you've interviewed. And I will literally keep trying. One day I'll speak to him, but I'll keep trying.
But he did email you back.
He did. I remember screenshotting it and sending it to you.
Yeah, I remember that. And then, just one more question from me. So, going back to, obviously, most of them you've done on telephone. I think you've probably done a few one-to-one. We're in the age of Zoom at the moment. Yeah. How many interviews did you do during lockdown?
Oh, God.
And how different were they?
So when lockdown first started, I'd literally gone from doing maybe, one every month to doing maybe one a week sometimes, right. Because, it used to be quite an ask to tell someone to do it by video call, because they're like, oh, what do I have to download? I can't be bothered. Yeah. But because Zoom and Teams have become just so normal now, it now is weird if you don't do it via Zoom. And it's completely changed, because all of a sudden, you're not just talking to some disembodied voice at the end of a phone. You're actually seeing people. Makes me mega nervous though, because I remember right at the start of lockdown, I was interviewing Matthew McConaughey.
Right, I don't want to talk. Do not want to talk about this. I'm still very annoyed about it.
So I'm literally sat there, like, just looking at myself on Zoom, like, oh God. And then all of a sudden it says Matthew McConaughey is in the waiting room, and I'm like, ah.
Yeah. So on that note, so where can we get this book?
So if you go to thoughtaeconomics.com, all one word. So all of the interviews are on there. So feel free to jump around and have a look. And right at the top of the page, there's a little link to find your nearest retailer wherever you are in the world.
Brilliant. And actually, I'm going to sneak in one question, because we've got just under 2 minutes. So just tell me a little bit about what you do with Mustard Tree. And also,
sure.
How disruptive have they been?
So Mustard Tree is the largest charity supporting people in poverty and homelessness across Greater Manchester. So I kind of volunteered with them for a long time, and then became an advisor, and I'm a trustee. And what they do that's disruptive is really sad. Like, it's sad that it is disruptive, which is actually in technology, you talk about human-centered design.
Yeah.
What they do is human-centered design for anti-poverty, right? Yeah. So they put the person at the center and figure out, what do you really need? How can we really help you? And that's why, they end up supporting about 10,000 people a year across Greater Manchester by putting the human at the center and really figuring out how to get people back on their feet and back to life. It's a remarkable organization.
Yeah. And is there anything that anyone that's listening can do to support Mustard Tree?
Yeah, so wherever you are, homelessness and anti-poverty charities really need your help. Mm-hmm. And that could be as much as being able to make a monthly commitment to them to help them along, or it might be volunteering your resources to help amplify their voice. But in all of our cities, in all of our towns, there are so many people who right now are facing some of the hardest economic times they've ever felt. Yeah. And so find your nearest poverty alleviation charity and just do something. I think we all have to.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's something also that, again, the student community is something that they can support as well. I think, especially if you're coming to, a new university. So let's just say you arrive at Salford in September. I think one thing that perhaps students don't do enough is actually engage with the local community, but also see how they can give back, because they learn as well.
And it shows you what the city's really like. You know, Manchester's had an incredible growth story, and there's parts of it which are very shiny and very nice and very new, but then there's a lot of it which needs really urgent help. So it's the best way to learn about what life's really like in a city, to meet new friends, to do something that just, makes you feel good and really impacts people's lives.
And also, Salford in particular, we're in our fourth industrial revolution.
Absolutely.
We were right here from the start, and it's just really amazing to see actually there's still parts of that legacy industrial revolution still there.
Absolutely. So, I mean, there's an incredible place, and Salford University, the students are so active. There's Enactus, which operates across the university, where students are coming together to do amazing things with non-profits. So, as a university, there's so many opportunities in Salford and through the university to really engage in the community.
Yeah. No, I think so. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
An absolute pleasure to know a little bit more about the book, and also some of the people that you've been interviewed. And I'm going to reread it.
I mean, I've been sitting here, guys, and it's been absolutely wonderful to hear everything you've been talking about. I must admit, I've been laughing out loud to myself quite a bit as well, because it's just so inspiring to hear these personal details of your experience, Vikas, and I think to give people a sense of how much you can do just by perseverance and being ambitious. And that, I think, is a wonderful message, along with the importance of these social skills. I think you're so right that it's such a crucial part of building understanding, awareness, and building relationships, which I think is, as you both sort of alluded to, the importance of relationships. And Future Everything is a fantastic example of a community of people that it's kind of boundless. There's so many people that want to explore the world differently and bring about greater changes. And that's what I think thought economics really does incredibly well.
Brilliant. So, thank you for having me. It's been great fun.
We are out of time, so thanks very much. We will have another event in a couple of weeks in the same place with Professor Robert Kozinets talking about netnography in the age of COVID, one of the world's experts in this area of research. So it just leaves me to say thank you both for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Naomi, for hosting the event, and thanks for all the questions as well. And we'll see you next time.
Okay, take care. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.